Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. In the last week or so, Johnny has filed a motion for continuance, which we will be discussing in this video, and a demurrer and plea in bar in response to Amber's counterclaim, which we will also be discussing in today's video. Starting off with the motion for continuance. It is essentially a request for the court to postpone or delay the date that has been set for the trial in Virginia, and that date is the 11th of January 2021. So Johnny is requesting the court to postpone it to sometime between March and June of next year. In support of his motion, he has provided 4 main reasons for the court to consider granting his motion. The first reason is that a good cause exists for this request. This one's pretty self-explanatory. They're basically setting the scene for the court. They're making the court aware that the arguments or the reasons that they are about to submit are good reasons that justify this delay, and that as per the law, such a motion should be granted if a good reason exists. So the first main reason relates to Johnny's filming schedule with regards to the 3rd installment of the Fantastic Beasts movies. As you all know, Johnny is very heavily involved in those movies. He plays the role of Grindelwald. And according to a letter that was sent to Johnny's manager by the president of legal affairs at Warner Brothers, the filming schedule for the movie has changed as a result of COVID and has now been scheduled to take place between early October 2020 until mid-February 2021. As I said earlier, the original date of the trial was set for the 11th of January next year, which of course falls within this time frame for filming. Now the issue here is the clash, because if Johnny is made to attend court during its original time period, then he won't be available for filming for the duration of the trial. Filming takes place in the UK, whereas the trial is being held in Virginia in the United States. This would mean that Johnny may be held liable for a potential breach of contract claim if he fails to execute his obligations as per the contract that he has with Warner Brothers. So it is being argued that Johnny has no control over the schedule, which is of course very believable. Actors rarely have any control over these things, and as such, he has been placed in an incredibly difficult position over which he has absolutely no control and which has transpired through no fault of his own, because this entire scheduling conflict is a result of the disruption caused by COVID. Their second main argument, but third officially in the court documents, is Amber's late filing of both her defense and her counterclaim. If it wasn't for COVID, she would have had to file both of these by the 17th of April 2020, 4 months before she actually ended up filing her documents on the 10th of August 2020. Johnny's team is alleging that Amber took advantage of the COVID emergency orders that were issued by the Supreme Court of Virginia, which essentially extended the deadlines for her to respond to Johnny's complaint, and that she waited until the very last week to file all her documents, presumably to put Johnny's team at a disadvantage. And this is a very common tactic that is utilized by some lawyers out there, where they file at the last minute to give themselves a tactical advantage and to put the other party at a disadvantage by giving them less time to adequately respond. Time is particularly of the essence in this situation because she didn't just file a defense, she filed a counterclaim. So now Johnny has found himself in the position of a defendant, and as such, he's entitled to enough time to adequately respond to these allegations. If it were merely a defense, then maybe this argument couldn't be successful. But addressing a counterclaim is just as important as it is for a defendant to be able to address the initial complaint. There's also the issue of the vast amount of depositions that are scheduled to take place in preparation for this trial. And on top of that, Amber wants to depose Adam Waldman himself, so the opposing side's lawyer. And it is an issue that needs to be resolved by the court, which of course means that more time is required to resolve this issue. There's also mention of Amber's legal team seeking to relitigate matters that were previously decided by another judge, which seems to be something that they do quite often because, as I said in my videos responding to her defense and her counterclaim, they are raising issues that were already determined by the court. For example, the court already found that 3 out of 4 statements alleged by Johnny to be defamatory are indeed actionable, and yet in her defense and counterclaim, Amber is once again arguing that they are not. Finally, Johnny's team submits that Amber would not suffer any unfair prejudice or any prejudice at all from this short delay, and this is self-explanatory. They basically state that she will not be placed at any disadvantage if this delay is granted. And to further support their claim, they once again rely on the fact that she herself took a lot of time to file her defense and counterclaim when she could have done it sooner. So delays are clearly not an issue for her. All right, my opinions quickly on this before we move on to the demurrer and the plea in bar. Generally speaking, courts are not fans of delay. The overarching objective of a court is efficiency and expediency and minimization of costs, time, and resources utilized in court proceedings. Having said that, I do thoroughly believe that the reasons provided by Johnny, primarily the contractual obligations he owes Warner Brothers, are very sound reasons for granting this short delay. Now, that's not to say that the other reason, which is Amber's own delay, is not a good reason as well. I'm just saying that from my point of view, the contractual obligation and the conflicting schedules is a stronger reason, in my opinion, purely because it would potentially make Johnny liable for a breach of contract claim, which of course would be unjust because, as I said, it's entirely out of Johnny's hands. He had nothing to do with this conflict of scheduling. After all, Amber was given leeway due to the COVID emergencies, so she was able to file her documents 4 months after she was meant to. And since COVID is the reason for the rescheduling of filming of Fantastic Beasts 3, then Johnny should be afforded the same leniency. All right, now for the demurrer. As I said in my previous video discussing Amber's counterclaim, one of the options that were available to Johnny was to file a demurrer or an objection to her counterclaim, and that is indeed what he ended up doing. This demurrer was filed yesterday as of the day of filming on the 31st of August 2020. So Johnny objects all 3 counts in her counterclaim. The first count is regarding a declaratory judgment that was sought by Amber in her counterclaim. So I did address this part in my counterclaim video. In her counterclaim, essentially the first count was that she should be declared to be immune from civil litigation based on Virginia's anti-SLAPP laws. So a declaratory judgment is a declaration of a party's legal rights. It's not enforceable in the sense that it doesn't order any of the parties, or anyone for that matter, to do or refrain from doing something. It's merely a court declaring that a party has a legal right to something, which in this case would be a legal declaration that she is immune from liability. Johnny's demurrer opposes this and characterizes it as a defense, merely masked as a counterclaim. So Johnny argues that a declaration is not appropriate when there is an actual dispute between the parties, as there is in this case. So they're saying that you can't simply state that you are seeking a declaration that you're immune from litigation for a cause of action, being defamation, that has already been found to be actionable by the court. The question of whether she is actually immune from civil litigation as per the anti-SLAPP laws of Virginia is a question that is to be determined during the trial, because it entirely depends on whether her statements meet the requirements of the anti-SLAPP statute, which is namely whether her statements fall under freedom of expression. You will also remember that the anti-SLAPP statute specifically states that this protection will not be afforded if these statements were made with actual malice. And whether they were indeed made with actual malice is a matter that must be resolved at trial. Count 2 relates to her allegations of defamation and defamation per se, which were extensively covered in my last video addressing her counterclaim. If you haven't watched it, then please do, because I will not be repeating my arguments here. But essentially, Johnny submits that Amber has failed to establish that any of the statements that she has relied upon in her counterclaim are actionable as defamatory statements. Count 3, which was the alleged violation of the Computer Crimes Act of Virginia, is also being objected to. This paragraph essentially summarizes the arguments I submitted in my analysis of her counterclaim. So in that video, I break down the elements that must be proven in order for Amber's claim to be successful, and I demonstrate that each and every one of them has not been satisfied. And of course, I do back up my arguments with evidence that clearly demonstrates that this claim has no merit whatsoever. So essentially, as you see in this paragraph, Johnny is alleging that Amber has failed to prove that the elements of the Computer Crimes Act have been satisfied, meaning she has failed to establish a link between her allegations and Johnny having anything to do with them whatsoever. And mind you, most of these allegations were entirely debunked by 5 minutes of simple research on the internet, so there wasn't even any need to prove that Johnny had nothing to do with these allegations because these allegations themselves never happened. Finally, the plea in bar. I've seen a lot of questions on Twitter asking what a plea in bar is, and it's essentially an answer to a plaintiff's claim, the plaintiff here being Amber, by the way, because it's a counterclaim, an answer that absolutely and entirely defeats a claim. And a very good example is this situation that we're dealing with here, which is a statutory limitation issue. So in this case, Amber relied on an article that was published in GQ magazine on November 2018 and a number of statements that were made by Adam Waldman throughout 2019, specifically up until July 2019. And she filed her counterclaim on the 10th of August 2020, which means that since November 2018 up until July 2019, more than 1 year has elapsed. And so Amber is essentially out of time to successfully bring a claim with regards to these allegations. This was actually addressed in a pinned comment under my counterclaims video, so if you want to have a read of that, then by all means, but I just summarized it right now. Furthermore, Johnny is giving Amber a taste of her own medicine by claiming that his statements are protected by Virginia's anti-SLAPP statute, and as a result, he is immune from civil liability and is requesting reimbursement for his legal costs. So we've already looked into Virginia's anti-SLAPP statute, either in my video addressing her defense or the counterclaim, I'm not sure at this point. But essentially, as I previously said, this protection only applies if, first and foremost, the statements fall under freedom of expression, and secondly, and most importantly, they were not made with actual malice. In Johnny's case, we've gone through his statements thoroughly in my counterclaim video, and based on the arguments that I made in that video, we have arrived at the conclusion that his statements were not made with actual malice. He was merely defending himself publicly against incredibly serious and baseless accusations that were being made against him by Amber. With regards to the time frame of what's to come next, Johnny's team have proposed a briefing schedule, which I will display on the screen for you right now. If the court accepts this schedule and if no opposition is made by Amber, then I suppose this is the timeline that we can expect to be followed. After the abomination that was Amber's counterclaim, I will say that it was a very nice and welcome change to read through court documents that are very well structured, concise, and clear. Basically a lawyer and a judge's dream, honestly. In my opinion, Johnny's team have presented very strong arguments. My videos were released over a week before any of Johnny's documents were filed, which means obviously I had no insight into what their arguments were going to be. And the same can be said for the other lawyers on Twitter. So essentially, we're all on the same page because, let's face it, it's the only page that you can logically be on if you know anything about this case. As for Amber's lawyers, I am getting a lot of questions regarding what on earth they're doing and what they're thinking by allowing her to make her claims. But unfortunately, the reality is that some lawyers are in this purely for the money. They are getting paid the big bucks. I don't know who's paying for Amber's legal costs. I don't know if Elon Musk is still there behind the scenes. I mean, he's got a kid and he's allegedly moved on now, but I don't know if he still has a flame for her, you know, in his heart. Whatever it is, these lawyers are making a lot of money out of this, and that's good enough reason for some lawyers. I hope I clearly conveyed the contents in these documents. As always, do let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I will catch you in a future video.